Both sported their badges and name tags. They looked well seasoned, the city's finest, there to uphold justice and peace. Spencer and Clark were their names. Neither had on police cams, only half-hearted smiles. The biker swallowed hard, not knowing what to expect. "Officer, can I help you?" Nick asked as if to accommodate them. The two cops again looked at each other. Then Spencer, the white officer with a wooden face, spoke up. "That's an unusual bike you've got there. Don't you think you're kind of old to be riding a kid's bike?" "It's my bike," Nick answered. "I've had it ever since I was a kid." He paused as the two officers looked suspiciously at him. "You know, the lockdown has been lifted. I thought I would take a ride through the park. There's no law against that, is it, officer?" The last statement that Nick made seemed to irk the lawmen. Nick also noticed that their friendly gestures and manners evaporated and devolved into looks of disdain. Feeling frustrated, the policeman asked, "You got some kind of ID?" Nick was starting to feel intimidated. He nervously reached around to grab his wallet, which caused the officers to put their hands on their service revolvers instinctively. They weren't taking any chances. "Whoa, officer," Nick cautiously said as he held up his hands. "I was just reaching for my ID." "Is it in your back pocket, Clark?" the black officer asked in a deep voice. He had a questioning, antagonistic look on his face. Nick slowly nodded his head. "Let me get it for you," the officer then said. He slowly walked around to Nick's backside and felt inside his right back pocket and then his left. As he pushed and probed, Nick felt his cold hands patting down his buttocks. He felt violated by the officer's actions as his hands moved from one cheek to the other. Now Nick knew what it felt like to be body searched. He didn't have to do all that, Nick felt. All he had to do was pull out my wallet. But there was no billfold there to be found. The officer returned to his position next to his partner, looked at him, and shook his head, indicating that the biker didn't have any form of identification. With the officer's permission, Nick slowly lowered his hands, reached around, and felt for his ID. "It's gone," he realized. "I must have left home without it." "Who are you and what's your name?" Officer Spencer asked in a disapproving tone. Nick gave his full name. "And where's your helmet?" Clark asked as he frowned. Nick knew it was a legitimate question. The headgear was meant for his protection. "You know it's against the law in this city to ride a bike without a helmet." "That can't be true," thought Nick. "They don't even require motorcycle riders in this state to wear a helmet." Nick felt that he was in serious trouble, and the fact that there were no observers made him feel even more uncomfortable. "I don't know if I believe you about that bike," Spencer said in a disparaging tone as he pointed to it. "As a matter of fact," he said as he took off his cap and rubbed his head, "we just got a report that somebody's bike is missing. They think it was stolen." He replaced his hat, looked at Clark, and said, "Maybe this is the bike." As the ebony officer nodded in compliance, Nick thought, "Am I being set up? Are they trying to railroad me? I can understand a white cop trying to pull this kind of crap, but a black guy? A brother? What is this?" "You know, we can run you in right now," Spencer said as he leaned in on Nick. "No license, no ID, and no helmet? Hell, you don't even have any kind of identification. For all I know, you could be some kind of convict or something." "I'm not a convict, and you don't need a license to ride a bicycle," Nick shot back in defiance. But in doing so, he realized his mistake. The comment seemed to make the officers even more confrontational. "This one's got a smart mouth," Clark then said as he took out his baton and tapped it lightly in his open hand. They again looked at each other as if planning something, but Nick didn't know just what. But whatever it was, he knew that it would not be good for him. The two officers were quiet for a while as they studied him. He was like a rabbit caught in a trap and nowhere to run or hide. They knew that if they aggressively questioned him there, he might break under the pressure and admit to his wrongdoing. But Nick didn't. No matter what they said, no matter the threat, or whatever they tried, Nick continued to claim his innocence. The officers regrouped and then tried a new tactic. "You must have stolen that bike from a kid," said one of the officers. "How else could you explain an oversized man like you riding a kid's bike like this? Or maybe you like boys and you're trying to lure them into a trap by using this bike. Who knows what you have in mind?" "No, I tell you, it's mine, and I don't like boys," Nick told the officers. The situation was starting to spin out of control. He knew if he tried to make a break, he could end up getting shot, and because of the remote location, no one would be the wiser.
"Get off that bike,"
Clark demanded as he more aggressively tapped the baton in his hand. Nick held on tight to the handlebars, defying him, but it was no use. Clark put down the baton, grabbed Nick's arm, and tried to force him off the bike. As physical contact between Nick and Clark occurred, a struggle ensued. Nick was forcibly removed from the bike as it fell to the ground. The only witness to the assault was a pair of deer hiding in the thicket, and they weren't talking. "Assaulting an officer and resisting arrest, eh?" Spencer questioned as he rushed in and joined in the melee to help his partner subdue the biker. They then wrestled him to the ground, and after a brief struggle, handcuffed him. Nick lied on the gravel surface. He could taste blood in his mouth and felt a stinging sensation in his head. Scratches and bruises were on his arms and torso. He tried to get up, but after multiple attempts, he just laid there and wondered, "What's going to happen to me?" It never occurred to him that the park, which had served as a beautiful sanctuary, might be the place of his demise. While in a prone position, the boyhood incident involving the cops reemerged in his mind. And like today's incident, he was accused of stealing a bike. But fortunately for him at the time, witnesses were around that could vouch for his behavior. The police let him go with a warning which he felt wasn't warranted because he was guilty of nothing, like the current situation. But now he was hard-pressed to get anyone to speak for him. The isolated location that they were at, or the lingering effects of the lockdown, prevented anyone from confirming his stellar character. Standing over him, the two policemen acted as though they were the judge, jurors, and executioners of Nick's fate. What crime was he guilty of? Would he be charged with the bogus complaint and hauled off to the slammer, or would he become a part of the scenery, never to be seen alive again? As he panted, remained motionless on the ground, and waited for his fate, a squawky sound came from the radio in the squad car. "Car 54, we have a follow-up on that missing bike story. Turns out it was a false alarm." The two officers acknowledged receipt of the message as they scornfully looked at their victim. "See, I told you I didn't steal this bike," Nick yelled in protest. "Yeah," Spencer said skeptically, "but I'm sure you're guilty of something." The two officers picked him up and threw him headfirst in the back of the squad car. "You can't arrest me," Nick yelled as he flailed and used his body to ram against the car doors, but they wouldn't budge. Realizing that he couldn't escape, he then muttered, "I haven't done anything wrong. I've never been in any kind of trouble with the law." "We'll see about that when we get you downtown," Clark said gruffly as the two officers brushed dirt and loose debris from their uniforms. "Yeah," Spencer confirmed. "You're lucky we got that last call. If it weren't for that, you'd be saying bye-bye to this world." He said it in such a cold tone that Nick was sure what the officer was saying was true.
"What do we do with the bike?"
Clark asked as they walked towards the front of the vehicle. Don't worry about it, Spencer responded. Just throw it in the bushes. No one will ever find it. And if they do, as old as it is, they'll just think it's been there for years. Nick remembered the last two things he saw as the police cruiser drove out of the area. One was the motorcycle handlebars of his bike. It laid amongst the jungle of weeds, never to be seen again. The second was his bike-riding neighbor, who had earlier that day given him the thumbs up. He was venturing along the gravel path in the opposite direction. The rider rode past the banana bike without even noticing it, nor did he see the passenger in the back of the cruiser. Had he shown up earlier, I might not be sitting here, Nick concluded as he again struggled with the handcuffs binding his wrists. The small amount of space in the back seat area of the car again reminded him of the limited footage of his apartment. Then he also remembered the 6x9-foot restrictions of a jail cell. Nick was headed for the lockup. The thought immediately made him feel hot, anxious, and even boiling mad. After he was taken to the downtown precinct, he was placed behind bars. It was then that Nick realized that the lockdown wasn't over. As a matter of fact, for him, it was just beginning.